people notice these things, they would go insane. And you have to be an incredibly strong person not to go insane. I said up to the sky, I said, I want to know everything. All the good and all the bad. Show me everything I can possibly learn in this life. All of the good and all of the bad, because I want to get as much information as possible so that I can help.
Hello and welcome to a Gareth Tonight special. Back by popular demand, I'm joined by Coco Sianne Ryder. Coco is an independent researcher, spiritual teacher and experiencer whose unique combination of esoteric insight and lived experience within the upper echelons of the music industry, both in the UK and the US, made her first appearance one of the show's most viewed and most discussed episodes. Her work bridges spiritual awakening, trauma manifestation, and hidden systems of control, revealing how unseen energies influence both personal reality and collective consciousness. Part 2 continues the journey into the relationship between magic, manipulation, and manifestation, while a yet-to-be-filmed Part 3 will take a deeper dive into mind control, frequency, and liberation. Coco, great to see you again. Your first appearance struck a real chord, actually, with viewers. Have you had any feedback at all since coming on the show?
Yeah, I've had a lot of very positive feedback from a lot of people. They seem to like the way that I communicate. So that's very good. I'm very happy about that.
No, that's great. That's great. We've had the same. Obviously, we're going to go slightly different with this one. So we're going to do this in 3 parts, of course. You often describe magic as both a creative and a controlling force. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, it's just like anything in the world that can be used depending on the intention of the person. So magic is basically just either the manipulation or the use of the energies that we have in the universe to achieve a particular outcome.
I think
so.
Yeah, people probably see magic as a negative thing, don't they? Or like see like black magic or whatever.
Yeah.
But how do you think then the awareness of energetic manipulation, the fact that it is out there, and obviously it's often not a good thing, but do you think that the awareness of it can actually help people reclaim their personal sovereignty in a way? Like if they're aware that they're being manipulated, that actually they can almost turn it?
Well, on a mass scale, when we're talking about the general population, they don't necessarily need to be aware that there's black magic and things going on, because a lot of people aren't going to believe in that. I think if we're talking about the masses and the public, the most important thing, and this is magical, but it doesn't have to sound magical to anybody, is to raise your vibration, to not be in a state of fear, panic, anger, shame. And if you can raise your vibration and try to develop a sort of inner peace and acceptance within yourself, then your judgment isn't clouded by all of those other negative emotions. And then you can act more effectively within the world to make change for yourself and for others.
See, when I hear raising your vibration and stuff and that sort of language, it reminds me of like the 60s and 70s, where you had that kind of what felt like a massive movement towards that, love and peace and stuff. Do you see patterns from, say, the 60s and 70s when actually that movement seemed to have quite a big sway on the political sphere, the protests against the Vietnam War and stuff, and how that was massive in America? Do you see kind of almost patterns then that you can see now as well with this so-called awakening, or an idea at least of an awakening?
Well, I don't really view the world right now in terms of awakening. I do think that there is a huge spiritual shift and there's a lot going on. And when there's a lot going on, obviously there's going to be a lot of people noticing what's going on and experiencing and feeling what's going on. But, you know, every generation is a mirror of the previous generation. And, you know, we're in the 2020s and it sort of resembles the 1920s, and who knows, maybe it sort of resembled the 1820s in some way or another. I think that everything has a pattern. The universe is made out of patterns, and we sort of follow in these patterns. And I like to think that with each age, we're progressing in some way or another, and certain aspects of ourself might devolve, but other aspects are evolving. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I know what you mean. I agree with the cycles as well. And in fact, actually, there's a whole another sort of, another rabbit hole in terms of the amount of great resets that there's been, historically.
Yes.
Actually, there is this ongoing loop. And, I'm one of those geeky guys that's into historical buildings and stuff. And I've climbed into old lead mines and seen stuff that I'm like, no way, like that was made with malnourished guys with pickaxes. Like, I'm not having it. So I think it's almost like the timeline is slightly off anyway. When it comes to magic though, because it's funny, because when I hear the word magic, I'm kind of torn a little bit between, someone in a darkened room with candles lit, messing around with a Ouija board, and then Paul Daniels, do you know what I mean, on Saturday night TV pulling a rabbit out of a hat, when it's actually probably kind of, more towards that, I guess. In terms of it being a tool to control people, how is this done in terms of the magic? How do they conduct the magic?
Well, how do they conduct the magic? Well, first, you kind of have to understand that we live in a world full of energy. And now I'm probably not the best person to describe all of these things. I don't have a very good memory and practical knowledge. I've read the same books over and over again for the last 15 years, and I still cannot use the correct language and remember the correct terminologies and things like that. So I'm not the best person in the world to describe how magic works. But I'm going to try my best, because I'm in this position where I understand, where I have experienced things, and I have, through my intuition, understood what's going on. So you have different kinds of magic, but it's all basically just harnessing the various energies and frequencies within the universe. And Hermetic magicians like to view the world as coming from 4 elements, or 5 basic elements. So fire and air and water, earth, and then you have either akasha or let's say spirit. And basically you're harnessing those sort of fundamental elements which gave life to everything in the universe. Now, this is a very particular language. This is an ancient occult language. And I'm sure that there are alternatives within science and physics, but I don't know how to make those connections. And I really hope that there are physicists and scientists out there who are looking into the occult so that they can make those connections, because there certainly are connections. There certainly is words in physics that would correlate with the words that occultists have been using for thousands of years. So there are different types of magic. There's obviously, you've got ceremonial magic, which, as you described, could be someone in a dark cave, with a wand or a dagger or whatever. And basically the purpose of being in a ceremonial circle and having candles and having incense and having certain visuals and certain chants is to tap into the five senses. So your sight, your feeling, your scent, and your hearing. And this goes in again to the five elements. And that's why the five pointed star is a very important symbol in not only magic, but for how the universe works. And basically in ceremonial magic, what you're doing is you're using all of these external devices to stimulate your imagination. And your imagination is, it's not something arbitrary that most people believe it is. We just think, oh, imagination, you know, I like to dream up things. But imagine that the creator of all things, or whatever, however you want to describe it, the source and life-giving energy, God, however you want to describe it, imagine that it's a mind, one enormous mind. And through its mentation and imagination, it brought everything into existence. So let's say that our mind and our imagination is more close to the truth of the universe than our physical body. So through your imagination and your mind, you can truly manipulate the world around you just through your thoughts and your imagination.
When I hear that, you know, kind of speak of the occult and the occultists and stuff like that, I always think of symbolism because it seems to be something that's so important to them. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's a case of actually maybe they're speaking to the subconscious? Obviously, you're talking there about different senses, but actually by putting symbolism out, it's talking to me and I don't even know it's talking to me, but it's saying something. Or is it also, or instead of, a kind of a way of communicating to other occultists, a way of saying, I'm just thinking, you know, politicians doing that stuff all the time, like that's not a natural position, yet they all do it. It makes me wonder, are they kind of almost signaling to each other?
Well, obviously, there's a psychological aspect there. They obviously have studied neurolinguistic programming and the various positions of the body that exert certain feelings in the people that they're around. So that's psychology. And then, of course, with symbolism in magic, and if we're referring to the dark network and not just the dark network, but, you know, people who practice magic in general, there is what you have what you call sigils. And that's, the principle is mainly psychological, but it's really both psychological and magical. The sigil is where you'll write a sentence, for example, and you'll take all the words within that sentence and you'll jumble them up and you'll turn them into a symbol in such a way that if you look at it, you know there's something in it, but you'll never figure out what it is. And it works. It sends information into the subconscious mind. Even if on a psychological level, it would be impossible to figure out what the sigil is, on a spiritual level, it's still sending an impression into the mind. And then in terms of other symbols, like, I don't know, sacred symbols like sacred geometry and things like that. Well, that's been in temples for thousands of years. And those symbols are used to harness the energy of the universe, utilize it for certain purposes.
The kind of the hidden symbols and stuff like that, you know, the subliminal messaging and stuff that goes into your brain. I think some of that's crazy. Like I've seen pictures before, and there's one famous one, I think, where it's like 3 flowers, and you just look at it. And I remember looking at it for ages. I'm like, what am I looking at? I'm looking at a drawing of 3 flowers. And then it was pointed out to me that it said sex across it. And I was like, oh, mate, I didn't even pick that up. But now when I see that picture, that's the first thing I see. I don't even see the flowers. I'm literally like, bosh. So is it, you know, as soon as you're aware almost of this subliminal stuff, that actually you see it absolutely everywhere?
Well, yes, because I've been dealing with this network of freaks consciously for the last 12 years, I have learned almost everything that I could learn. Well, obviously, there's always more to learn, and I hope I don't have to learn it. But I've learned a lot, and I do recognize all of these things. But in terms of certain sigils, I'll know it's a sigil, but I won't be able to figure out what's in it. And so I might be worried about how that's affecting me subconsciously and spiritually. But even again, your awareness, even if you can't figure out what the message is behind it, you, through your awareness and calmness, you can sort of transcend whatever effect it might have. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're aware, because it can be quite scary when you realize that these things are happening around you.
Absolutely. And I think, like, in terms of, well, not, I was going to say about having a normal life, that's the wrong word to use, but in terms of, like, as soon as you're aware of certain things like that, then, for instance, you know, if you're watching a Disney film, particularly Disney, it must be like, well, there's that. I'm not even following the storyline anymore, because all I can just see is this symbolic stuff everywhere. I notice it all the time in films, I have to say.
Yes, and I like Disney films because I grew up on kids' films, cartoons, and things like that. So I still enjoy watching them. Every now and then they'll put out a decent one. Very rare these days, but every now and then they'll put out a decent one. I think the most recent one that was really good, but also full of sort of mind control symbolism, was the Dalmatians one. They did 100 Dalmatians live action remake, and it's full of references towards split personalities and trauma and things like that. And yeah, I notice these things within film, and that's affecting, the masses. And a lot of the things in film is more obvious, more clear.
Yeah, I see climate change propaganda all the time in Disney films, like constantly. And they're really subtle little things that you pick up on. And I'm looking at the kids, and the kids aren't noticing anything, but I'm like, no, that's, like you'll have just a bird flying, and then when you look down, it's like the Golden Gate Bridge is underwater and the cities are underwater, and they don't even mention it. And you're like, okay,
Yeah,
well, I get what you're trying to plant in my head there. In terms of controlling through magic, obviously we spoke last time about the fact that you can almost see telltale signs of someone that's mind controlled, whether they be a superstar, a musician, a politician, a film star, whatever. How do these people select their targets? Because I can understand, if you've got a real talented kid that's coming up and is making waves in, the music scene or whatever, that they might want to attach to that to then go, okay, I think they're going to be a star. That's the horse to back.
yes.
But is there more to it than that as well?
There's obviously a natural progression of things where someone will show up and they'll jump onto that and then ride the wave and then promote that particular person. There is that, of course. And then there's also the more interesting and organized side, which is, you have people who will look into the astrology charts of certain children or certain people. And there is a way, if you know what you're looking for as an astrologer, there is a way to see whether this particular person can really influence the minds of millions of people. So what they say or what they write will affect millions of people. And when they can find someone who has a birth chart like that, they know that they're in for a lot. Because not only can they, groom that person to build a certain career path and make money that way, but also they can use that person to spread the message that they would like to spread. And so you find these individuals who have this power about them, that their voice and their words can reach millions of people. And, it could be really decent people. And they could be really beautiful children. It could be a child or an adult that they've found, that they've come across. And, well, the grooming aspect is what you slip into their mind and how you direct them, the kind of ideologies that they might have. Why does everyone in Hollywood have the same ideology? Why does everyone in entertainment have the same perspective on what's going on in the world? That's not normal. So if you can find someone who has that power and direct them in that way, it's very useful. But then also, it's not just astrology, it's also people that can just spot and read your energy on the spot. They can see a person with a spark. And then also you have the bloodline aspect. Someone along the chain of influence will know your bloodline. And that's very useful to them. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't really understand the bloodline aspect. And then, of course, in my case, and there could be something to do with bloodline in my case, but I'm not really aware of that. I do know that there's a Freemason in the family, and he's Scottish. Who knows? But I would say in my case, just because I was born into a family and a world where I'm exposed to certain types of people who already have all of this knowledge and awareness, when they spot a kid like me and they look at my birth chart and they look at my birth date and they look at my energy and they look at my family and the influence that I have and how easy it would be for me to enter into the entertainment world, from a very young age, they would decide to invest in you and not, involving the family or the parents. They don't have to have any knowledge of it. They'll just decide to invest in you. And then they will use their network to be able to set up certain people around you in your life as you're growing up to help direct you. And then, of course, in my case, the occult and magic side of the mind control, there are people within my family who are under the influence of that type of control. And that way that has been utilized to get me to go in certain directions. I was supposed to move to Los Angeles when I was 15 and start a career. And I refused. And my life has been really, really messed up since then. But that's not the first time that I evaded the path that was put in front of me. And I think that I have probably upset a lot of people who had some investment in me.
So could you be in a situation then where, because for me, like the basic thing would be like someone will come up to you as a young artist or a musician or anything and go, look, this is how I can help you. Come with me and I can introduce you to this, music lawyer or this, whatever. But actually, what sounded like you're suggesting there, in a way, they can be putting that all in place without you even knowing it. So you meet people on the off chance. God, what a lucky meeting when actually that was set up in advance by someone else.
Yes, precisely.
Wow.
It all looks natural. And the whole Hollywood world, Los Angeles, is a very extreme example of this unnatural, synthesized life. You never know what you're experiencing within that world, if it's real or not. If there's actors around you, or if the scenario has been orchestrated or synthesized. That's why all of these entertainment folk are so out of touch with reality, because they've been living in a dream world, basically.
So I'm thinking now, my instant thought is someone like Greta Thunberg. So she's a kid. I don't believe she's trying to hoodwink the world as a small child. She goes onto the street with a placard, and suddenly she just gets spotted by all the right people that just happen to be walking past at that time. And suddenly, do you think then they would have identified her, maybe from a birth chart? I know her parents are actors. I know her grandfather's, I think he's a famous actor in Sweden.
Well, again, her parents are actors, so she's already on the radar. And who knows, maybe she was spotted or not. Maybe she was put there when she was spotted. And yes, that's exactly how it works. These children and people are groomed for certain paths and certain directions.
In terms of how they control, do they control? I mean, I can understand the obvious way, which is I'm indebted to them because they've paid for my everything. But in terms of other ways, where maybe the people talk about hypnosis, the fact that people are almost under a spell and they don't realize, and you hear often from like old friends, they're like, I don't even know that person anymore. They're not the person they were when we were growing up. And then there's also people talk about almost like attachment, like an entity attachment. So basically, essentially, yes, I'm the car and the engine's running, but it's not me behind the wheel anymore. There's someone else in my place acting out.
Well, to get to that point, that's something very difficult to achieve. It has to be with someone who's really not okay in terms of complete replacement, which is a full possession. That's very difficult to achieve. However, attachments, entity attachments are definitely a thing. And if you're a very healthy person on the inside, it's very difficult to put attachments on people. And so it'll be a process over months or years of sowing chaos into the person's life and putting them through various traumas that might open them up to these entities. And then they would attach these entities. And I wish I could go into so much detail about what are entities and how does the magic work. But my God, that's a whole hour of conversation. And I'm not skilled enough to go into all of that yet. But I will eventually. But it's not just entities. Obviously, you have the mind control and hypnosis aspect, and then you have the aspect of just creating the synthesized environment around them where you're leading them and directing them. But if we're talking about the magic and the occult aspect, I've sort of briefly mentioned this in the previous interview, which is kind of the concept of selling your soul. It's when they're able to break through your spiritual bodies to such a degree and fill your immediate vicinity up with so many either attachments or thought forms or vibrations that cloud your consciousness from the guidance of your soul. And then an occultist, if they've managed to achieve that level of damage, they can occultly, through thought transference and concentration techniques, replace the guidance of your soul and replace the guidance of your heart with their guidance. And so instead of being led by your heart, by your instinct and not your instinct, by your intuition, instead of being led by your intuition, you are being led by a manipulator. And this is such a subtle thing, but it's incredibly profound. If you can knock someone out of that heart-directed and soul-directed guidance, you can achieve a lot in terms of control and manipulation.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're very much aware of the growing surveillance state emerging all around us. Whatever you do, you're being watched and your data being harvested. This is why Glenn and Eric Mader formed the Privacy Academy. Join the community designed to help overwhelmed, non-techie people like me learn how to get private online. Head over to privacyacademy.com/Ike and learn how to exit the surveillance state with regular webinars exclusively for you. Now, back to the show. I must admit, in terms of very famous people, whether it be, someone like Michael Jordan with what happened to his father, being murdered. I know Kanye has sort of pointed towards that in the sense that almost people are put through a trauma, something is done to them, to then almost either bring them on side or to kind of, I guess, fracture them in a way so that they are damaged and therefore more susceptible. So I suppose what you're saying earlier about the fact that they could identify someone from their birth chart or even from their bloodline or whatever, and they can just make stuff happen for them brilliantly for their career without them knowing. I guess at the same time, they could make things horrendous happen to fracture that person to then come in.
Yeah, you do both things at once, or in succession. You do the trauma, and then you do the nice thing, the achievements, the successes, and that's part of trauma-based mind control, which is you're put through a horrific trauma, and then you're taken somewhere to have fun, go on a roller coaster or something. So that's part of creating dissociation within the person. And David Chappelle mentioned this, I think, when he was on Oprah many years ago, when he said that he felt that he was being intentionally put through stress. And she tried to brush it off like, oh, you're mentally unwell and you need help. And he was like trying to say, no, people have been intentionally putting me through stress. And this is part of a sort of initiation that they put you through. They'll put you through a bunch of really severe things. And it could be even just to see if you can handle it. Because going forward, you'll be, bound to them for life. So they need to know if you can handle what they have in store for you. But then also there's the benefit of them putting you through these various traumas.
Would you say that could be something that happened to someone, say Britney Spears, that they would put through this trauma and almost she failed the test in a way because she snapped and, couldn't deal with it. And now, we see what they feel like humiliation rituals put on Instagram fairly regularly, to be honest. Whereas someone like Dave Chappelle, who I think Dave Chappelle probably knows more than he's letting on about the way the world works, to be honest. I just get that. I don't know that for a fact, Coco, at all, apart from I get a vibe from him that I think he knows more maybe than he's letting on. But he passed the test, so he goes on, he's the superstar. Britney breaks as a result of it. Well,
I'll just say personally, and I don't really get lost in all of those silly circles of cloning and replacements and things like that. But in David Chappelle's case, it's very particular because he was invited by very powerful people within the government to sit down with them, and they were talking about redoing his old show, but that they would have to change the direction, the kinds of jokes that he would be saying, that he wouldn't be able to make jokes about the Black community anymore, that he'd have to change his approach, that it would have to be woke, basically. And this was before woke was a thing. And he said, well, no, why would I do that? And they told him, well, because we're going to have a Black president and we need you to do this. And he said, no. And there was a whole series of things that happened after that. And basically his cousin said that he disappeared for several months. And this person that came back claiming to be David Chappelle was not her cousin. And they don't look They don't look alike. It doesn't look or sound like David Chappelle to me. I don't really buy into the whole clone theories. Obviously, I think cloning happens. But I do think that they can find people who look like the person and sound like the person and train them to behave as that person, put them through various cosmetic surgeries. Now that's a whole, that's a whole conspiracy. And I don't know. It could be possible in this world. If there's anything I've learned the last 12 years, that pretty much anything is possible. So I have an open mind.
100%. I mean, the Paul McCartney one, I've got to say, because there's theories about everything. I bumped into, Elvis Presley in the Into Centre in Derby, buying hair clips. But with the Paul McCartney one, you look at the Paul McCartney before he supposedly died and the Paul McCartney, it's got a completely different facial structure, to me at least. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't know. It could be. I haven't looked into it. As I said, I have an open mind. I don't think so, but I do have an open mind. If I'm given convincing enough evidence. Now, the face change thing is not convincing enough evidence for me. But there was a lot of information surrounding David Chappelle that was convincing. That whole thing with Obama becoming president, them saying that we're going to have a black president like 2 years before Obama was a president. That's when you know that this person has entered into the most dangerous territory you could possibly enter into. When you are being asked by those people to do them favors, you have entered into the most dangerous territory. Scary people, really scary people.
I've heard from people as well in terms of not necessarily where someone is replaced by someone else, whether it be a clone or whether it be just someone that looks like them, whatever. But actually, they themselves become a different person. I know, Beyonce says she's got an alter ego when she goes on stage or whatever. And I'd heard from a couple of people over the years that basically when Mick Jagger, I think we spoke about this before actually, when Mick Jagger would be a certain way, he'd go into the dressing room on his own. Whatever went on in there, I don't know. But the person that came out and walked on stage was not Mick Jagger, basically. It was a completely different person. Now, someone could look at that, I suppose, as someone, they're just getting in the zone. But then I think, well, I don't know. Well, maybe there's more to it than that.
He could be entering into some kind of trance, consciously knowing what he's doing to try and shift his energy and enter into a different sort of personality, which is the performer. And on a sort of microcosmic scale, every performer has to do that in some way, shape, or form. Maybe he's taken it to another level with trance or magic or drugs, or even there could be a mind control aspect involved there. I don't know with him. I'm not sure about most of the old generation of musicians. I know that a lot of the newer generation, let's say entertainers, have been deeply affected by mind control from a young age. And you can start that kind of mind control at anyone at any age, and it can be sort of effective. It can be effective. But then you've got people like, I would say, Lady Gaga definitely has multiple personalities. I would say Beyonce, I don't know about multiple personalities, but definitely she has this dissociative capacity. She definitely has entities attached to her. But this is all just just from observation. And I have spent a lot of time observing these things. So, yeah.
Is magic something that we can use for good? And I don't necessarily mean in terms of just envisaging stuff so that, I want more money, or I want a bigger house, or I want a better car. If I focus, then this time next year, like Only Fools and Horses, next time next year we'll be millionaires and all that kind of stuff. But I mean in terms of actually trying to make the world a better place. So you've kind of got these, the darker side of it where they're trying to mind control people to an end, which is a lot more nefarious, that actually, magic itself is neutral, right? We can use that magic to try and almost put out light, and I know I sound like a hippie, but you get my point, to try and make the world better rather than negative.
The highest form of magic, of hermetic magic, is to try to achieve adeptship through mastering your will and your mind and your animal nature and your passions, and becoming pure compassion and courage. And through a series of or a lifetime of practice with various spiritual exercises, let's say, you can really achieve these things where you have control over your mind and your body, and you can start to affect the world around you positively. Now, I don't like to encourage anyone to, cast spells and do things like that, which, can be very good, and people, experiment and find the things that work for them. But I think that one of the most important aspects of the occult that has been forgotten, which is why things have become such a mess, is that first you have to master yourself. If you go around casting spells and doing ceremonial magic without having first worked through all of your insecurities and your bad habits and your problems, your issues, from what I've seen in the world today, where we have access to pretty much all of the knowledge of various schools of practice and thought to do with magic, people have become incredibly selfish. In all of the serious occult work I've read over the years, they've all said that you're not supposed to charge money to heal someone spiritually. And I'm going to upset a lot of people by saying that, because it's their life's work. And I perfectly accept that is their life's work, and I'm very open to it. But it's my very personal belief that you're not supposed to charge money for those kinds of things, because it sort of inverts the purpose of it. You're supposed to be using that spiritual power that you have to heal people around you, to heal the world. If you can heal yourself, you're healing the world. If you can master yourself, you're helping the rest of the world master yourself, because we're all, the human race is connected. And again, this all sounds very hippie-ish, but it's actually very, very serious ideas and philosophies that go back thousands of years.
Is part of working on yourself, do you think, almost working on a way of protecting yourself? And I don't mean like kind of putting up a barrier, although a lot of people do that. But when you hear about stuff like energy harvesting and entity attachment and stuff like that, that kind of, is there a way that you can work on yourself to stop that happening without basically putting up a big barrier and being essentially cold and disconnected?
Yeah. If I could go back in time 5 years and just tell myself to stop being afraid, to stop fighting, to stop trying to fight back and defend myself, and instead focus on something much higher, something much more beautiful, to focus on, I would say God for me personally, but to focus on some uniting and lofty principle within nature. I probably could have saved myself from years of suffering in spiritual warfare. But even if I did go back in time and tell myself those things, I probably wouldn't believe it. And I'd have to keep fighting. Because when an injustice is happening, you can't just accept that injustice. You have to get angry and you have to fight back. It's a natural human response. But in that natural human response of trying to either fight back or push back or put up barriers and walls and things like that to protect myself, I was focusing on the very thing that was harming me spiritually. And I think that the only way that I could have learnt this lesson is to have gone through this severe spiritual warfare the last 5 years. And I'm grateful that I have, because now I have so much incredible firsthand knowledge on the use of magic. But it's one of the fundamental occult principles that to fight back against black magic, you don't fight at all. You tune in on a much higher vibration. And you mentioned something about energy harvesting. To go back to the idea of the targets for, let's say, the occultists within the network. It's not just about finding people who they can utilize for, certain career paths, but they also have people who you'll never hear about, who are just either born into an occult environment or have a Freemason in their family, or you'll have someone who's in a town or a village where there's a cult, and they can spot this person or this child that has a very powerful soul and spiritual, beautiful energy that connects to the divine. And what these ridiculous people will do, because they're so disconnected from the divine themselves, is that they'll take this child or this person, they'll bring them into their ceremonies and their rituals, and they'll utilize that pure energy of the child to fuel their own ceremonial magic. Yeah,
see, that's where stuff gets really dark, isn't it? And it's stuff that's been going on for so long. You talk about, Bohemian Grove and all these other things, these occult rituals that all these, elites, not that I like using the term elites, to be honest, mate, but that they get up to. But it kind of, but then it goes all the way back to the Aztecs, the sacrificing of children, and even now where you've got all these, big, rebuilding of Christianity. It's like, well, if you go in Old Testament, then, Herod killing the firstborn child of everyone in Egypt, like this is dark stuff. I think that's what it tends to be, that point where people go, I don't want to know, because it's too hard for people to understand.
It's too dark.
Yeah,
it's too dark. And I took on this mission when I was 18, and I was going through my spiritual transformations, and I said up to the sky, I said, I want to know everything. All the good and all the bad. Show me everything I can possibly learn in this life. All of the good and all of the bad, because I want to get as much information as possible so that I can help humanity. And well, let's just say that the universe answered me. And it's just, since then, it's been a non-stop onslaught of knowledge. And the first bit of knowledge was about the beauty within all things that connects all things. And I felt so connected to the universe, to the world, to people around me. I saw beauty living alive everywhere. And then the next step was when I started, peering into the world of evil, the knowledge of evil. And well, once you step into that and you start uncovering the evil, and you really, really open your eyes and you say, I'm going to open my eyes to everything. Show me everything. There's a reason why most people don't notice all of the terrible things going on. There are children being trafficked in broad daylight in the cities all across the world. People don't notice it. It's a protective mechanism, because if people notice these things, they would go insane. And you have to be an incredibly strong person not to go insane. And I guess what I've been asking the universe the last 12 years of my life is, how can I know? How can I carry the knowledge of all of this evil and not let it destroy me? And that's been my sort of quest, try and figure out how to do that. And it's only now in the last 5 years, after all of this spiritual warfare, that I've started to understand how to do that. I have to accept everything as it is. And that sounds horrible. But I have to. I have to accept that all of these terrible things are happening, that this is the human race, this is what we've done. I have to accept it so that I can carry it. And just the act of carrying the knowledge of all of those horrible things is already, it's already an act of healing. You know, when someone just listens to you, they can't really help you, but they just listen. And it's like a gift. They're just listening, but it's healing. I feel like just the fact that I'm able to carry all of this knowledge is already something. It's already something good. And once you reach that state of awareness and peace, which I haven't yet, then I can really start to figure out how to act. How can I make a difference in the world?
Yeah, well, that's the first point, isn't it? Is acceptance, the reality of what's going on. I think, you know, it pretends to be a Rubicon that people don't want to cross, which I completely understand. And you get the same reaction, which is they wouldn't do that, and you're like, no, you wouldn't do that. You know, and I get it, because as soon as you accept that stuff, then you kind of go, well, what else in my life? Like, everything's a lie, everything I've ever believed. And no one wants to believe that. And then it starts to almost bring back traumas for themselves. Well, what about this when I was young? Hang on. And I get it. I get why people don't want to do it. And it's almost like the people that do see it almost have their eyes, almost like Clockwork Orange style. It's like life has forced you to see this stuff through the trauma that you've been through.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
You mentioned how this aspect of this dark aspect of the, the occultists, and even within religion and throughout the ages, how it's always been there. And I would say that aspect, you know, the Mayans and the child sacrifice and all of that stuff, it's an inversion. It's an inversion of magic. And you have this sort of constant push and pull and struggle between those who are learning these ancient arts of magic and the ancient occult philosophies, who want to do it for a good purpose, and then those who are brought into it, but there's something inside them that is corrupted or corruptible, and they pervert and invert those magical powers that you can harness within the universe, so that they can accumulate power. It's like this insatiable need and desire within them to accumulate as much power as possible by any means possible.
Last time we were talking, because what I did yesterday is I put a post out on social media saying that you were coming back on the show, because obviously, like I said, it was received really, really well. And I asked if people wanted some questions to ask you. Now, there were loads and loads and loads. So I just literally grabbed a couple that kind of I thought I wanted to ask myself, to be honest. Now, when we were talking before about, you know, the superstars that make it really big, and it's like, okay, they've maybe either been groomed from a young age, as we've spoken about, or maybe they've kind of been corrupted further down the line, and you know. And so this person asked, they were like, what about Oasis? Because obviously they're huge, you know, absolutely huge. This person suggested, because they're into everything that you're saying, that they thought maybe they could be a massive band that had not bowed to the cult or had not been taken over by the cult. And I wondered what your take was on that, and if you believe that these people that can become so massive, like, you know, how many nights in a stadium sold out massive, can get there without playing the game, essentially.
Well, that's a very interesting question. And, you know, I said in the previous interview, you know, not everyone within the entertainment industry is going to believe in the occult. And, you know, you have all of these nuances. So I wouldn't say that the band members of Oasis are spiritual people. I wouldn't say that they have a great occult power within them. But I would say that when you're that big and you've made that much money and you have that much sway within the industry, you are still completely surrounded by people who are using neurolinguistic programming on you, and using subliminal messages around you, and all of that stuff. In terms of selling the soul, I mean, what kind of ideals did these people have in the first place? I mean, were they already people that are, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, but are more concerned with material matters? What can I do today to have fun? You know, I want to eat, fuck, and be merry, basically. And that's perfectly natural and perfectly human. And if you're already on that sort of materialistic basis, well, then you're going to be just fine in that environment, surrounded by all of that kind of influence. So I wouldn't say that there's something terribly dark going on, but more just kind of human to do with those lads and many others in a similar position. If that makes any sense?
No, it makes total sense, yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that sort of that materialistic thing, because that was another question where someone was asking me to ask you essentially about gold and money, in the sense that gold and money is what society's based on, which is a metal and paper that you can't eat. Yet when people get involved in magic, or it's often to amass more wealth, or to amass more power, which tends to come with wealth. Yet there's none of it, you know, about the ability to provide food for themselves and how to live and love and whatever. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's just, it's almost like, essentially gold is bright and sparkly, right? So it's a way of kind of distracting you away from your true self, which is probably the opposite of that.
I don't know. I think there's a natural evolution of the human psyche that we just keep getting further and further away from our human nature, because we're kind of like spilling out into the world of our imagination. And I think that that's a kind of natural consequence of being born of this universe and having the kind of intellect that we do. So, you know, once we traded food and goods to survive, and now we've gotten to this point where we've amassed so much wealth that things are more about, well, what can we consume? What can we get? What can we do? It's just a sort of natural consequence of human evolution, I suppose. You know, but to go off a little bit, within my family, there are kids who are kind of going into the industry. And I looked at it and I thought, well, you know, they have this whole world ahead of them, this whole life ahead of them, and they're so young, and they're already being put in schools for learning certain arts. I'm trying to be non-specific right now. And I thought, well, you know, I didn't realize when I was that age that what I would really want in the future is to learn how to grow my own food and to maybe make my own clothes or to fix furniture or to fix electronics or plumbing so that I could be self-sufficient and I could have real world skills to really be connected to my humanity. And I think, I don't know, it's a strange parting of the ways between what is our more animal nature and what is the direction our imagination is taking us in with this sort of false idea of money and what we can create.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid. Well, I say a kid actually. I was probably in my early 20s actually, and I was always desperate to be something. You know, I was going to be a footballer, and then I was going to be an ice hockey player, and then I was going to be, you know, a musician and whatever else. And I remember my dad just saying to me, "Have you ever thought about just being?" Like, and I honestly, Coco, I'd literally never considered that for a single minute. That actually, just the fact that you are here and that you are connected to all other human beings and to nature and everything else is just that sort of a miracle in itself.
Yeah.
How many YouTube videos you have on your latest single is sort of an irrelevance in comparison to everything else. When you said earlier about bloodlines, you said you were unsure about bloodlines, but maybe there's something in that that's how people are selected. Well, obviously, last time we spoke, you mentioned Taylor Swift and that your friend had said that basically she was, psychotic. And we had, I got an email from a guy who said, "I've just watched your interview with Coco, loved it." He was like, the thing about Taylor Swift's really interesting. And he sent me an article that basically said that she's distantly related, Taylor Swift is distantly related to, I think it's eighth cousin to Jeffrey Dahmer and to Mark Chapman, who apparently killed John Lennon. I don't know if that's anything you've heard of or whether there's anything in that in terms of bloodline.
Oh, yes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you carry the memory in some way or another. I don't really know the scientific equivalent, biological equivalent on how to explain that. They would say that you can't carry memory, literal memory, through your DNA, but there's some kind of, there's something that's being passed and shared through the DNA on a biological and scientific level. And then on the spiritual level, on the karmic level, when your soul goes to reincarnate, which is what I believe personally, it's going to pick a particular bloodline or family or body that it relates to, right? So if that soul had experience in its previous incarnation as being manipulative or psychotic or violent in any way, they're going to be drawn towards a bloodline, a family that has those similar traits within them. And then another thing about Taylor Swift, you said something along the lines of in the last interview that, just being psychopathic can be enough to succeed and be successful within that world. I would say that she wasn't necessarily chosen for her birth chart. I mean, I would say that within her birth chart, you could find that she would be able to influence millions and millions of people through her voice, but not chosen necessarily because she has some kind of spiritual occult nature, but just for the fact that she has a placement where she can attract the attention of millions of people.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of psychotic element, or if there is a lack of empathy, which I guess is exactly what comes with psychopathy, that is a recipe to get to the top, right? Because you're not going to be looking around you going, well, if I do this, I'm going to crush that person, or you just crush them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose you could apply that to business and politics and everything, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
is there any more questions?
Plenty of psychopaths are out. Well, just finally then, without revealing too much, because we don't want to reveal too much, obviously, but what can we expect in part 3? Because we're going to do 3 conversations, each one being slightly different. So for our third conversation, which I think we're going to try and do in the next week or two. We'll get an exact date on that, of course. Otherwise, that wouldn't work. What kind of thing are we going to be talking about there, do you think?
Well, I will share the very few memories that I have of Monarch mind control. I'm sure everyone's very curious about that. I'll just share it because I know people are curious about it. I'm not necessarily sure what good sharing it is going to do, but I will share those memories. And then we can go into more detail about Monarch programming. And then I would like to talk about the various technologies that are used in mind control today, because they have new technology that is incredibly, is it RFK Jr. that mentioned it recently? He was talking about 5G and how they have this technology that's going to be able to control every aspect of your life. Well, it goes deeper than that. This new technology really has the ability to not only control every aspect of your life in terms of externally, but also internally. It's going to be able to influence your behavior. And I think, some very good insight onto what that technology is and how it's done and how it's going to be utilized. So
that sounds fascinating, terrifying, but fascinating. Coco, thank you so much. I've loved talking to you again, and like I say, we'll pick a date in the next week or two and have another conversation. It sounds fascinating. And actually, today I was talking on one of the other shows on the channel, Trending, about the fact that MIT are talking about the fact that they've got these chips, these brain chips now that they can inject through needles that are, I think, the billionth the size of a piece of rice that can affect the brain. And you're like, everything you've said there, it would fit in with that kind of technology, which is.
Well, they don't need chips. They don't need chips. That's the thing. Everything can be done remotely. They don't need to put chips in your body. We've already been being poisoned with metals in the air and vaccines and things like that for decades. We already have all of the technology in our body. They don't need to put chips in our body. I'll just say that.
Well, that's me done then. And I thought by avoiding vaccines all my life, I'd done all right. But I suppose, I'm breathing it in, aren't I? Left, right and centre. But yeah. Thank you, Coco. I've loved talking to you again. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Magic. And thank you so much to everyone at home for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Take care. Good night.